should be driving national agendas. And to the extent that they think that gossip columns, the Baba Jukwas, like I mentioned, Bishop Lazarus, and all other funny columns that we read in the press should be driving the national agenda to the extent where it trivializes who we are as a people, I think we must be excused from that nonsense.
Food for thought for our media. Join us after the break for the third and final segment of the Diplomatic Encounter. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Diplomatic Encounter, where today we're having an interesting as well as informative talk with the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Hospitality Industry, Dr. Walter Mzembi. Coming closer to home, Honorable Minister, are the people, the ordinary Zimbabweans, part of the tourism action?
Yeah, to a very large extent, ordinary people become part of tourism action, to the extent that governments are able to raise middle classes that can afford products. And I'll give you an example of China's recent escapades. It's raising of a middle class to the tune of 300 million people. And it has manifested itself now, expressed itself through China becoming the world's top or biggest spender in tourism at 140 billion. With 98 million of them traveling outbound every year. And China is set, obviously, to outpace the rest of the world in this regard because they've managed to raise the middle class. So going forward, even with us here in Zimbabwe, our ability to raise the middle class, because we now have top end and bottom end, a very small class of rich people and a very wide base of the pyramid of very, very poor people who cannot afford our products. So we must incentivize demand. How are we going to do it? We are proposing a civil service incentive travel scheme, which we have already developed and passed on to the employer, the Civil Service Commission, to make sure that our civil servants, those who cannot afford, are afforded at least a holiday to go and distress once a year. We are also pushing a school tourism product, which I'm glad President aptly captured through his instruction to minister in this sector on the Know Your Country campaign, Know Your Zimbabwe campaign, which we will very soon table before cabinet and subsequently launch. Because the best ambassador of any country is its citizenry. You can't excel a country without beginning that charity at home. And this is why this exercise would also extend itself even to the diaspora, because that is where our middle class is now residing. It is in orbit. Those that can afford to spend on Zimbabwe are in orbit in the diaspora. So we want to make sure that we attract them back to the center, which is to their country, and incentivize them in the same context. So it is a function of affordability. And government must drive a policy that must deliberately price products preferentially to the Zimbabwean. Okay, and we must do that off-peak seasons when we are not very busy. We don't want to make our hotels continue to register 10-15% occupancy when they could be filled up with domestic tourists. Another major factor that is going to drive domestic tourism is religious tourism in itself. You saw recently our Judgment Night commanded 150,000 people. We're working on other projects that will put 2 million people in one place worshipping. But they will be spending in hotels, they will be feeding, they will be drinking water, and that in itself will be captured as tourism expenditure. But a more recent and very interesting example is the biggest street party now in Southern Africa, our own Harare International Carnival. I would hope that going forward into future editions, we can command upwards of 2 million people on the streets. We think, and we really think that we had about 1.5 million people on the streets of Harare, expressing themselves in a joyous mood. But we must capture this at policy level to an extent where it becomes brand Zimbabwe in a street party. Okay, so every part of your country, activities, social, economic, even political to a large extent, can be captured in this street party, people celebrating their diversity, but in a joyous and happy atmosphere. And if we can't deliver happiness to our people, then we're not good for business. You can have diamonds, gold, and other mineral endowments. If they don't bring a cheer on people's faces, then they are not good for us.
Dr. Mzembi, maybe to just go back a little bit, Professor Anthony Karigia, president of the ECTT, said, open quote, the successful organization of this world event, the UNWTO, in spite of the huge logistic and economic challenges, proves without doubt the capacity of Zimbabwe to organize world-level events, close quote. So do you see Zimbabwe hosting maybe a world event like the World Cup?
Well, if you recall, post-World Cup 2010, I shouted my voice hoarse on the need for Zimbabwe to start thinking big. And I meant that on the back of the then famous Zimbabwe-Brazil match, which we managed to bring into our own backyard here, notwithstanding the prophets of doom, who were saying this man must be crazy. How can he ever imagine that he would bring Brazil here? We have done so many things here with all these voices trying to pull us back, including this event, the bestowment of these awards. There was a lot of detractor voices here, from within and outside, including the European Union and even some of our colleagues that I work with. But it didn't stop us. You don't stop when the dog is barking at the moon. Does the moon stop moving? So we look ahead, we fix our eyes on the big picture. And the big picture is that we have already brought Brazil to play Zimbabwe, and it happened before a 70,000 colorful crowd. We have enough stadia in this country to host a few matches, but we should not be greedy. We should not copy the 2010 South African model where they arrogated themselves all the matches when they promised us earlier on that this would be spread across the region. If we bid tomorrow for World Cup, it would include stadia in South Africa, it would include stadia in Mozambique, in Zambia, Botswana, and the region can actually put forward a regional bid anchored by its regional infrastructure, as opposed to unitary infrastructure that may find in one country or the other. So yes, we have the capacity. We have the capacity to lead the bid. We have the capacity to host as much as 1 million spectators that come for matches. And just for your information, if we could host 1.5 million people in Robert Mugabe Street, what stops us from hosting 1.5 million spectators in the SADC region for a World Cup?
Any last words to the people of Zimbabwe?
My last word is really to the media. And I speak to the media because I think they are drawing us back in terms of our advances in repositioning brand Zimbabwe. Please don't reduce Zimbabwe to a comic book or a comical experience where we can spend a whole week just seeing the same headlines about policemen being beaten by a Mapo story, and it is fed to us daily, front page, until the following Sunday. We have far much more serious issues to be communicating to our country. We have Zim Asset, which we really should popularize and make it our Bible of economic transformation and liberation. And this is what we should be unpacking instead of getting the hilarious stuff that really does not assist us. We want it in certain sections of the papers, but it shouldn't certainly command the front page space for a whole week. Otherwise, we are really trivializing our agenda. In fact, we are making a laughing stock of our literary prowessness, where we claim that we are 93% literate. Yes, literate, but certainly not learned in some of those key areas.
Zimbabwe is indeed a beautiful, beautiful nation, and we thank the Ministry of Tourism and Hospitality Industry for raising our country's flag high.